everyone. My name is Tori and I'm the Executive Director of the Enid Symphony Orchestra. Today I've got Doug Newell, our Artistic Director, and we also have a very special guest, pianist and composer, Dr. Karen Walwyn. Karen, welcome to the show today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about the concert coming up next week. Can't wait.
Yeah.
We are too. Can you tell us, where are you today?
I am in Melrose, Massachusetts.
Melrose, okay. All right, terrific.
About 18 minutes from where I work at Berklee College of Music in Boston.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Gotta love technology, so we can have these interviews virtually instead of flying you in from Massachusetts and flying back and then flying back out for the performance next weekend. So we'll talk about the concert next weekend, Saturday, September 14th. We'd love to focus on the Piano Concerto and sort of your inspirations and your creative process and everything like that. Before we begin, I do want to thank our sponsors for this concert. I'd like to thank Messer Bowers Insurance Company, Park Avenue Thrift, and the Oklahoma Arts Council with assistance from the National Endowment for the Arts.
Terrific.
Yes. So, Karen, before we begin, can you tell us about how you became involved in music, what inspired you to pursue piano performance and composition? Can you speak a little to that?
Absolutely. Actually, music was pretty much always in my life ever since I can remember. My father would, on Sunday mornings in particular, play Bach on the record player. And so I would hear a lot of organ music and some keyboard music, but it was every Sunday morning. And somewhere around the age of 3 or 4, I was taking lessons with him. And I understand that came around because my grandmother, who was an organist, she saw apparently me doing something that indicated that it was time for me to take lessons. And so my father was my first teacher. Then after we probably butt heads, probably more and more pleasant lessons, I guess it was time for me to study with, someone outside of the house. So it was various music teachers in the first few years, and probably by the time that I reached my senior year in high school, I was pretty set on getting through all of my degrees in piano performance. And so I finished my bachelor's at the University of Miami and my master's at the University of Miami. I studied with Dr. James Robert Floyd, who is still someone that I am very much in contact with. And he's been so inspirational for me down through the years. And then I finished my doctorate at the University of Michigan. And so along the way, composition wasn't really in my thought, to be honest. Piano performance, I started while I was in the midst of my doctoral degree, looking at music by composers of color. And it was after I graduated and I actually had a position at the University of Michigan that I won a couple of awards that would allow me to make my first 2 recordings. And those recordings were called Dark Fires, and they were works by composers of color, mostly premier recordings. And so that's when I started to get an idea of composition on my own. I just remember one day thinking, I really never realized that someone that looks like me can have works performed. And I think I must have felt inspired because it was the summer before 9/11 that I started writing myself. And by that time, I had come across Florence Price. Florence Price was one of the first few female composers of color that I would get to know, just very faintly, just enough that the names were in my head, but I didn't know the music yet. But it was in the summer prior to the event, unfortunate, tragic event of 9/11 that I actually started writing. And the reason I mentioned 9/11 is because it was on the day of 9/11 that I had been in the United States, traveling back to Spain, where I was then living. And it was on that day, 9/11, that I was supposed to be on a flight to Spain.
Oh, wow.
And
Oh,
so,
my goodness.
yeah. And what had happened when I was in Spain earlier that summer, I had written about 4 measures, maybe. It took me 4 hours, and I thought, oh my God, this takes way too long. I put the down. I'm done. And then I don't know how to explain it, but I'm there at the airport. I didn't know what was going on because the Greyhound bus had just dropped us off 11 o'clock in the morning, didn't let us know that something was terribly wrong that morning. And when I'm waiting at the counter for assistance to get on my flight to Spain, finally the attendant from behind the desk at KLM looked up at me and said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I know I'm early, but I'd like to, get my bags checked, et cetera." And so then that's when she looked at me and like something was wrong with me. And of course, I didn't know. So one thing after another, that day remained frozen in my mind forever. By the time I got back to Spain, I went back to the piano, I picked up the pencil, and I continued writing. And without any feelings of force or just it just spilled out. And so my very first composition was Reflections on 9/11. It ended up being a 57-minute work and 7 movements for solo piano. And since then, I've been writing along with performing, and something I didn't expect, but I'm very grateful for the way things unfolded.
I think I'm particularly excited that you're going to be performing one of your own compositions, A Journey from Afar.
Yes.
Can you tell me about the genesis of that? Tell me a little bit about
Yes.
your connection there.
I was in South Carolina about 3 days before the shooting at Mother Emanuel. And I had happened to have experienced a rather odd day. I was there for a dear friend of mine. Her father had passed. We went to do some quick errands, and one of those errands happened to be in Goodwill. It just so happened. I was in Goodwill, and it was just like the sun was out. People were friendly. It's extraordinarily friendly from all walks of life, just saying hello to me. And it's like I was soaking in the culture. And then when I arrived home, drove back home up to Virginia, I think it was the next morning I heard about the shooting. And it just struck me so painfully, because I had just been in the area where people were so warm, so beautiful. Everyone was saying hello to everyone and treating each one like humans and like friends. And then this shooting happened. And so I started writing. And so the story of the 5 movements of this work starts with, which is the first movement, which you'll hear, starts with the idea of enslaved being brought over, being brought in on the ships over, and upon arrival being separated, families being separated and sold, and experiencing some of that tragedy that would happen to the human life during that period of time. And but at the end of this movement, you'll hear a triumphant ending that looks forward in the future for the hope of building on society and bringing us more together and connected and supportive of each other. So that's the first movement that you'll hear on the concert next week.
Wonderful. So we're actually going to hear music of 4 female composers on this program, Karen Walwyn, and then she will perform the Florence Price Piano Concerto in 1 movement. And we will also, prior to that, we will hear a piece by Lily Boulanger, the younger sister of Nadia Boulanger, Dans Matin de Printemps. My French is terrible. I just asked my wife. She's from North Carolina too. But anyway, and then Vyacheslava Kapralova.
Yes.
Yes.
Kapralova.
We were saying Kapralova for so long, and it's Kapralova. I don't know if you know any of her music or not. She was a protege of Martineau, I believe. But her work that we will hear dates from 1938. Lily Boulanger's work dates from
1917, I believe.
1917. The Florence Price Concerto dates from 1924.
1934, right?
1930, 32.
Okay, and then your piece dates from 2007? 15. Yeah. I won't say confused, but nonetheless, yes. So we have a wide range of musical perspective and influence. So you re-recorded the concerto in 2022 with the Arkansas Symphony, but you're not only a composer and a performing pianist, you're quite a scholar. From everything I gather in the errata sheets I've seen, I was very fortunate that the conductor of the Arkansas Symphony shared his score with me, so I have those notes to work from and to share with musicians in advance of the rehearsal. And in fact, the librarian shared with me a couple of errata sheets that he prepared.
Wonderful.
There. So we're able to get that out to all of the players, and they can see this. How, because you've played this concerto, I assume more than twice. Just the 2 recordings. When was the first time you played it?
So in 2011, I was invited by the Center of Black Music Research in Chicago by Morris Phibbs. And he explained to me that Trevor Weston, composer Trevor Weston, was actually orchestrating the orchestra parts of the concerto. This is around the time that probably 2/3 of the music of Florence Price was then discovered in the abandoned home, her abandoned home. And so with that, they invited me to make this premiere recording of the concerto once the orchestration was completed. And so this would be my first time looking at the score and the first time hearing the orchestra play was in that rehearsal the night before the concert. And that's pretty scary when you think about it. Never.
Yeah.
It can be extremely scary.
And then after the concert, we recorded it the next day. And that too was, when I really think about what just happened here, especially looking back, knowing how many times I've played it and how many changes I've made according to my own personal growth, according to the research that I've done on Florence Price, and according to just understanding her heritage, her culture, and the adjustments made since then. So that first recording was, green, as you call it. Just getting familiar with the notes. And in fact, that recording led to an invitation by Jim Greason from the University of Arkansas, who was doing a documentary on Florence Price. And so he would send me scores that were also new to the public ear. So I, I would end up having the opportunity to premiere recordings of those works for solo piano. And wow, her music just speaks so beautifully of a story of a woman from a period of time that we don't really get to hear a lot about. And not only does she spin these stories so beautifully, she has the courage to share the stories. And it's not just because of sharing stories from a period of time that's difficult in American history, but because of her own personal struggles. One such struggle being that her mother would leave the state of Arkansas, which is where Florence Price was born, and what one might say abandoned her daughter. Her daughter was of age. Her daughter was in Florence Price. Florence Price was in her early 20s, but her mother, after many tragic events in their lives, when Jim Crow laws came into effect, her mother made a decision to leave and return to her home, Indianapolis, and slip into white society. And this was after Florence Price's father passed. Florence's father was a dentist, but when Jim Crow came in to being, Florence's father's patients, who were mostly white, could no longer remain as patients of his, and he lost his business. And then Florence actually had a brother who we are just learning about because there was nothing really written unless you dig deep. And so it was discovered that her brother had been accused of physically assaulting a white woman and was carted off to prison, never to be heard from again. And so after these two horrible tragedies, Florence's mother would leave. And so as she's passing into society, Caucasian society, Florence is left with a decision. Is she going to fight to continue sharing her heritage, or is she going to hide and follow the footsteps of her mother? But she does not hide. And in practically 75%, maybe more, of her works, you hear the characteristics of music that was brought over from the slave ships. The Juba dance is one such musical style that was used during the time of slavery here in the United States, but the rhythms came from West Africa. And you hear some of those rhythmic characteristics in so much of her music. Or you might hear the type of melodic writing that suggests that you're sitting in a church listening to a spiritual being sung. And you might hear textures that might remind you of Southern times. You might feel like you're riding down an old Southern lane on dirt road and seeing cotton fields, which actually Florence saw on her way to school when she walked to school. So she didn't hide her heritage. She was quite courageous, and the music is so inviting that you want to hear more, you want to know more. Who is this wonderful, strong, amazing woman?
And were her works, as she was doing them, were they celebrated and appreciated while she was alive and actively composing, or did she have more of like a sort of like a surgence much later after her death?
So both are actually would describe her life. In the 30s, the symphony would win the first prize in a composition competition, and that would lead to a performance with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and that concert would mark the beginning of her international career, because then her name was in Europe, and concerts were scheduled for her to travel to Europe. Unfortunately, she passed before that would happen. But she was she also had I believe it was the piano sonata that won first prize as well in the composition competition. And so with these winnings, she was actively involved in several organizations. Many of them she was the first Black to become a member of. Other organizations which were historically Black organizations, such as the National Association of Negro Musicians, celebrated her, honored her. And so such singers as Marian Anderson sung her works. And so there were many supporters during those last 2 decades of her life, that while she did have her music performed quite a bit, she still pushed very hard to get her symphonic works performed on the East Coast. And so she wrote repeatedly to the Maestro Kutsevitsky at Boston. It's funny, that's where I live now. But she wrote at least 6 letters to the conductor, and he wouldn't respond to any of them. And in each one, you hear the persistence of, you know, my blood has some Negro blood in it, and I am female, but that does not and should not get in the way of a review of my scores, for example. I'm not saying the words exactly as it's written, but that's sort of the tone of what she was asking of the conductor. And these letters you can find in Dr. Raylinda Brown's biography that she wrote on Florence Price. And she was a self-promoter. She was writing music for piano, small young piano students. She was teaching, and I don't really know how she did all of that, and had 3 children, with 2 daughters, 5. Yes, and of course, 2 husbands. One not at the same time, obviously.
She just didn't sleep. Like
I really don't know how she did. You know, back in those days, it's amazing how much work she put out, because ultimately it seems to be somewhere over 450 pieces of music that she has. As I said, quite a huge amount does still need to be edited, published. But one of my good friends is an editor of her music, and he's going over that piano music and some of the vocal music every day, because he just wants to help get that music out. And it's so much work left to do. But I've enjoyed learning about her through her music, and I've enjoyed reading about her, and I've enjoyed visiting the soil in which she walked upon.
Yeah. For for either like students or performers or scholars, musicologists, in finding works by Florence Price, as you're mentioning, she has 450 at least in her arsenal of pieces that she's written. What sorts of advice or tools or resources should people look into to have access to this music, or to like discover this music and bring it to attention?
At this time, the bulk of the scores can be found at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville at special collections.
Ooh.
But of course, this is looking at music that has not yet been edited. The edited scores are currently under Schirmer Publications, and as of this year, January 1st, 2024, there are now other publications, other publishing companies that can now actually publish her music. And so at that point, online, doing a dive is going to be the best, because everything is just so brand new.
Right.
Yes, but Schirmer did have the copyright officially until the first of this current year, January 1st, 24.
That's still pretty recent.
Yes.
Only 9 months ago.
Yes. So there's a lot of people taking advantage of that.
Oh, yes. Well, wonderful. So I know obviously you're doing tons of work in preparation for our upcoming concert next weekend. And after this performance, what other projects do you have going on? What's your big goal for after that?
Well, funny, I actually returned to Oklahoma a month later to perform I think it's at the University of Oklahoma. And what was it, State Oklahoma? Oh boy, if she hears me, she's going to kill me.
Was it in Stillwater?
It's in Stillwater. You're at the McKnight Center.
Oh, did I tell you already?
Yeah. I believe you'll be at the McKnight Center in October.
It's only an hour away. So
Yeah.
Enid, if you're watching and you want to come back, drive out to Stillwater.
And I've never been to Oklahoma in my life, so now I'm going to do it twice inside of a 4-week period. So I'm excited about that, and I'll be doing Florence Price works there, solo concert, and later this academic year I'm going to be doing 2 recordings. I was very, very, very blessed to win a recording award at Berkeley. It's a faculty recording award, and so I have some hours. Not to kill, but to desperately record. So I am going to actually learn the rest of and perform and record the work, the other movements of the work that you're going to hear this coming week. So the Charleston, that's going to be like a 45, 50-minute work as well. So I don't know what it is about me and length, but just can't seem to do anything short.
Right.
It's quite all right. It's wonderful.
You can't do the 5-minute pieces.
Those are tough. Those are tough. And then the second recording will be my second set of works by Florence Price for piano. So if I make it through that and I'm still alive, I'll be happy.
Yes. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, everything.
Yes. And I have a few other concerts that I'll be playing throughout the year as well. But it promises to be an extraordinarily busy, but hopefully very productive year to come.
Yes. Very, very fruitful, very successful year. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. That's so kind of you to share these moments with us.
My pleasure, and I'm looking forward to us working together next week, and I'm very excited. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for everybody here in Enid watching. And don't forget, the concert is Saturday, September 14th at 7:30 p.m. at the Enid Symphony Center. Box office and cash bar opens at 6:30. And we'll have a complimentary reception provided by the Enid Symphony Auxiliary. That's free to attend after the concert. So come to the concert, enjoy a drink, hear an hour of incredible and inspiring music, and then come for free food. It's going to be an amazing night. So tickets are on sale at enidsymphony.org and by calling 580-237-9646. So thank you, Karen, for joining us today, and thank you all to our Enid residents for joining us as well.
I didn't know about the free food. I'll definitely be there.
Oh, perfect.
It's quite nice.
It is. It is.
Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We'll see you next Thursday night
Next Thursday.
in Tulsa.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Well, it's good
Terrific.
good to see you online. Thank you.